Empowering Your Voice. My name is Bonnie.
And I'm Carol Ann.
And I'm Kathy.
And I'm Colette.
Today we have the very great pleasure of introducing Courtney Reiner. She is the founder of a wonderful ministry called She Wears Worth. 2 years ago, Courtney came into our lives when my daughter-in-law and a number of girls from her youth group attended a She Wears Worth conference here. And today, you are going to hear even more about the upcoming conference that is coming in April. Last year, because my daughter-in-law loved the She Wears Worth theme so much, she organized a mini conference with Courtney's help here locally, and a number of girls were able to attend and were so impacted by it. They are actually having a big bake and craft sale next week to raise funds to make sure that every young woman who wants to attend this conference is able to attend. When I asked Courtney what would be the very best way to introduce her, she gave me 5 specific points that she would like to talk about and expound on today. I'll just read them to you now, if that's okay. Number 1, she is redeemed by Christ through his grace. Number 2, she is the founder of She Wears Worth. Number 3, she is a biological foster and adoptive mom. Number 4, she hosts a podcast called Whoa, What? Word. So, as you can imagine, number 5, she is from Texas and she is surviving our Canadian winters. So I'm very excited to actually interact with Courtney today. We've sent emails and messages, but today we're actually going to have a conversation with Courtney, and I hope that you'll all listen carefully. She has a beautiful heart, especially for our young women today.
Hey, ladies, thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you for that introduction. I am so honored to get to be here. Like you said, I'm the first official interviewee that you're doing, and I'm so humbled and honored by that. I'm excited to share a bit about kind of my story and how a girl from South Texas growing up on the beach ended up in central southern Manitoba, surviving her 6th winter. And to tell of my story is to tell of Christ. And I think that is the most incredible gift that I will ever be given. And I was just given a child a couple of months ago. So I think that says a lot. But so to kind of start, my name is Courtney Reiner. I am the founder of an organization called She Wears Worth. Our main goal is to help girls and women know their worth and their value in Christ so that they can live freely and confidently in who God called them to be. And this is, if somebody would have told me, 6 years ago that I would be living where I'm living, doing what I'm doing, having an organization like this, I would have laughed in their face and said, there's not for $1 million. Like, I in no way see my life like taking that big of a turn. But what I have learned is anytime we think there's no way, that's when God steps in and he's like, watch it, girlfriend. I have a joke with my husband that I don't say no anymore. Like, just outright, like, no, I'll never do that, because I know this is not like theologically correct, but I never say that, because I always say there is an angel in heaven that like taps, hey, I don't know if you heard, but Courtney said she would never do that. So challenge accepted. I really can't think of the last time I've outright said like, I'll never do that, because chances are I will. So to kind of start, I'm born and raised in South Texas. I came from a wonderful family. I grew up in the church, Catholic church. So it was, and I don't want this to be a reflection of the Catholic Church. It was definitely me. I never church was always a thing I did. It was never more than that. It was, you go to church every Sunday, you dress really cute for Easter and Christmas. And I was an altar server for like 11 years. I did all of the things, like any box that needed to be checked by a quote unquote, good Catholic girl. I checked them. And it kind of, that was it. I learned the prayers that I needed to learn. I knew when to stand and when to kneel and all of that. And I always knew about God. Like I always knew Jesus was there, and I definitely prayed to him, but it was more of like, praying to a big man that sat in a chair super far away. And if I was lucky, he would say, yeah, we'll answer that one. There was no relationship. There was no understanding that like he knitted me together. He wanted to know Courtney. It was more of like a Hercules type figure in his big, mighty chair. And that's kind of how I lived my life. I would say growing up into college and even into my 20s. Also, I think I learned very quickly at a young age who I was supposed to be as far as like who people expected me to be. I came from a great family. I had a wonderful mom and dad, an awesome younger brother. And with that came expectations, to do well in school and to be captain of the volleyball team. And so again, I think through that, taking those two things, I learned what I needed to do to be the person people wanted me to be. And what started off as, kind of innocent in high school, wanting to, look good on the outside, turned into me being two different people. I would do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, with whoever I wanted, Monday through Saturday night. And I'd show up to church on Sunday, and I'd sit in the pew and get sprinkled with some holy water, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. And it was good. In my mind, my slate was washed clean. I did what I needed to do. So much so like I have so many memories of, getting up, being so tired. And I mean, if we're being honest, hungover, and showing up to church on Sunday, going to church, sitting there for an hour, because, it was an hour long, get up and then, go meet my friends for brunch and have them tell me how good of a person I was, oh my, Courtney, I can't believe you go to church. You're such a good person. And I believed it. Like I believed all of those things that like, you're right. I am better than you because I sat in that pew for an hour, and you know what? The pew was wooden. It wasn't even cushioned. So like I sat on an uncomfortable pew for an hour, which seems so silly, but unfortunately that's the way my mind worked. And like, I always knew that I could pray, and I know I've prayed, I journaled about it, but they weren't personal prayers. When I read them back, it's not like I was talking to a friend. It's like I was talking to someone that, man, if I'm lucky enough, maybe he'll give me a moment of his time. So yeah, fast forward, and that's kind of the life I lived. I graduated college. From Texas, I moved to Manhattan, and I lived and worked in the fashion industry for a while, which was, so fun, but also just not a great life. Then I moved and lived in Boston, Massachusetts for about, I think, 5 years. So that was my first taste of winter, actually. And when I moved, I said, I'll never live in this cold again. So there was the first hot jokes on me. And then I moved back to Austin, Texas, and it was there. I had an awesome job. I lived in a beautiful apartment downtown, in my mid-20s. I would say on the outside, my life was so, Instagrammable. I had made it. I was great. I had the cute boy on my arm, all of those things. And it was leading up to my 27th birthday. And I remember just feeling so empty and lonely, and I didn't understand it. Like reading journal entries of just how completely clueless I was. Cause in my mind, I thought I went to church and it was enough. Like it was fine. And, my 27th birthday, I remember exactly what I had on. It was a beautiful solid glitter skirt with some boots and a cute jacket, and went out with my friends, and I hated every minute of it. And I left early, and I came home, and I think that might've been the first time that I genuinely cried out to God. Like, what is going on? Like, I don't understand this. Like, why am I so unhappy? Like, I'm the happy girl. I'm the girl that has it all together. Like, where's this hole in my heart? And there was a book on my bookshelf called Love Does by Bob Goff. And a friend of mine had given it to me many months ago. And of course it sat on my shelf. And I just felt the urge. I need to read this book, which is very random. Was not a book reader. Started reading it that night and finished it. I mean, so quickly. And for those of you who don't know what it is, Bob Goff he runs a nonprofit based out of San Diego, where his whole thing is, it's founded on Christian principles and beliefs, but his main thing is go love your neighbor. Like, before you go and preach the gospel, love really, really well. Like, if you can love like Jesus, then you will earn the right to tell them about your Jesus. And I closed that book and I thought, you know what? I am in no way ready to go on a mission trip. Like, who am I to go preach the gospel? Like, I was just dancing on a table, 12 hours ago. But I'm good at loving people. So I need to go on one of these trips. So I remember telling my family, and they're used to me like being all over the place. They're like, yeah, sure, cool. You're going to go to Uganda. And I'm like, no, I'm going. Like, I'm going to Uganda. It's happening. And by God's goodness, I was one of 16 strangers chosen to go on this trip to Uganda, Africa in April of 2017. And I didn't know anyone. We didn't meet before. We all met in the Amsterdam airport, and I had no idea what was in store at all. I had no idea what I was getting into. The second morning of the trip, I remember waking up and everyone has their coffee and is reading. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are they all reading? And oh, they're reading their Bible. I didn't pack one. It wasn't on the packing list, but I did bring 7 pairs of shoes for a 9-day trip. So I feel like that perfectly explains where my mind was at. Didn't bring a Bible, but for some reason, Courtney needed 7 pairs of shoes for her trip to the middle of third world country, Africa. And so I those moments, God has a sense of humor, and God knows each one of us so personally. And I think he knew I needed that moment. I know that God knew that that was one way for him just to kind of give me a little shake and be like, girlfriend, something's not right here. There's more. Yeah, it is weird that you did that. Keep asking, keep pursuing. And so that evening, I was sitting in a rocking chair and just remember thinking man, these people are so happy. They have something, they're joyful. And at this point, we've learned all about, our jobs and what we do and where we came from. And, it sounds bad, but by earthly standards, I'm why are some of these people so happy? My life is so much better than theirs. And I was sitting on this rocking chair in the evening, and this guy came and sat next to me. There was 2 guys on the trip, and one of them, and I just kind of word vomited my life to him. It was I don't even know why, but was oh, I had lived with a boyfriend for several months, and I knew it was wrong, but I did it anyway. And I still have guilt about it, and I didn't know why. And just all these things started coming out. And he looked at me with just honestly the kindest eyes and just asked, okay, thank you for sharing, but what is your relationship like with God? And it was a weird moment because I'm in sales. I like talking. And I was kind of I don't know you. And so I just started giving him my Christian resume. Well, I was born and raised Catholic, and I was an altar server, and that blah, 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 blah. Look at me, I'm so good. And he kind of chuckled and was well, that's great. Good for you for doing those things. But that's not what I asked. What is your relationship with Christ? And I felt that was the first time I got a big dose of humility, because I had no idea how to answer that question. I am not one to be at loss for words. And I was what do you mean? And it turned into this just vulnerable, innocent, when I look back, I was like a child asking, like, well, what do you mean a relationship? What do you mean you talk to God? What do you mean he talks back to you? What do you mean he knows me? What do you, just like all these things that I just didn't grasp. Like this person sitting next to me was talking about Christ as if they were best friends. And I didn't understand that. Yeah, like I get chills thinking about it because I just was in awe of like, how does this person know this God so intimately? Like you've never seen him. So how? And even though I had so many questions after that conversation, I went back to my, little hotel, like hammock bungalow type room. And my roommate was fast asleep. And I got out on my iPad and I wrote a little, I don't know if it was an email or just like a note, I guess, to God. And I'm so glad I did because I read it every year. And it was just me saying like, hi, hi, God. And I put in the first line, I have no idea what I'm asking. I have no idea what it is that I'm even looking for, but I want what these people have. And I think it's you. I want joy. I want this freedom. Like, and I put in the last line, like, I want to see differently. I want to hear differently. Like from this day forward, I want to live my life for you and for you alone. And the next day was April 16th, Easter Sunday of 2017. And I know it's not everyone's testimony, but for me, I woke up and I was a different person. It changed. I woke up and I saw differently. I heard differently. Yeah, like I want to go back and give that girl a hug and just say like, that was the day that you were made new. Like you were born again that day. And sorry, it's not lost on me how lucky I was that God chose to save me that day. And that I, through him and him alone, humbled myself and just said, here I am, like, take it or leave it, please take it. And he did. So yeah, Easter Sunday, April 16th, 2017, that's my made new day. That's the best day of my life. And I've had some really great days since then. And yeah, and I honestly, I feel often like we could end the conversation there. And I think that's a beautiful story, right? Like it is. And I've heard so many beautiful testimonies of how, God came in and just changed people. But I think what I am finding is as amazing as that whole time was, that was the mountaintop. And where I have seen God over and over and over again has been in all of the valleys since then. And oftentimes when you hear people tell their testimony, they talk about that. I was saved, I was made new. But then what immediately comes after that, is the dark valley, because the devil knows, hey, we just lost one. Like we got to step up our game. And that's exactly what happened really to me. So I get back to Austin. The trip in Africa was only 9 days. So I get back to Austin and it's like, all of a sudden I'm not surrounded by these people anymore. And I'm back into my apartment and my job and that hustle lifestyle. And, I did Amazon Prime a Bible. So living in Austin, things literally do come in 24 hours. So I got that in my Bible highlighters and it's like, okay, I'm ready to go now. And it was like, where do I begin? And I just started reading. And I think that's some of the biggest questions people ask is like, where do you start? And I mean, there definitely are good places to start, some more than others, but I just jumped in and was like, you know what? I'm just going to start reading what I don't know. I'm going to ask questions about, like, I'm going to highlight things. I'm going to put question marks. I'm going to follow, like, I just want to know. And it was in that time that I learned so much because I read the Bible for the first time now on my own. And I was learning about these characters that are broken and confused and did terrible things, yet God still used them. And so my mind, it was like my mind was blown by that because I just assumed everyone in the Bible were these perfect people, right? Like if they made it into this ancient book, then geez Louise, they better be pretty top tier. When I'm reading it and I'm like, man, I got nothing on these people. Like I'd be like, so it was weird because like I had that side of it that was like, I couldn't absorb it fast enough. And then I had this other side that was like, okay, Courtney, it's time to face 27 years of sin and 27 years of doing things that the world told you was perfectly acceptable. And now, as a child of God, who is made in the image of Christ, who is worthy and valued, like you hurt your body. You did things to your heart and to your mind and to your soul. And now we have to face those. And so it was some of the best months, and it was the hardest. And thankfully, I guess, spoiler, the guy that sat next to me and asked me that question is my husband. I know, the best. So so I guess the thing is, we came back from that trip. We went on that trip in two very different places. He had been a youth pastor for 10 years. He was there on sabbatical. I was there because I was a hot mess. And we knew that Christ was bringing us together, but it was one of those, he has since told me that after the trip, he came back to Canada and he prayed like, God, she is not at all what I have prayed for. Like, I have been hands and knees praying for a wife, and it is not her, which I just love. Again, God's like, oh, but it is. And so before we even dating came way later, but he was so kind, and every night I felt like we talked for 2 hours, and I just had question after question after question of like, what does this mean? And what is this? And I remember him telling me one night that, you should desire to get closer to Christ every day. And I was like, that question kind of annoyed me, because I only related to that point. I could only relate love and relationship to human love and relationship. So in my mind, I'm like, well, you can't get closer to someone every single day, like you can grow, but, and I just look back and I'm like, man, Courtney, you had no idea, like just no clue of what was in store for you. Like no idea what God was offering, because I think especially for someone who is new to the church or like trying to figure it out, people can tell you these amazing things. You could be listening to this, but you will compare Christ's love or what Christ is offering to what you have experienced, to what you know. And unfortunately, that's oftentimes skewed completely because you have never experienced unconditional love. You didn't have a parent who loved you well. You have never been in a relationship with someone who loved you for who you were, right? And so I think that was me. I kept trying to compare Christ's love to, okay, well, maybe it's like a love of this world, and it just wasn't. And so, as I was learning and trying to absorb all of this stuff and facing my sins and everything, that's kind of when She Wears Worth, I would say, like the Lord kind of gave it to me, like downloaded so this is back in like 2017, 2018. And it was because I would have these incredible moments with Christ in my apartment or on FaceTime with Scott. I joined a church in Austin and was just blown away of how honest and amazing these people were and welcoming. So I'd have these really amazing moments, and I'm learning who I am, who Christ says I am. And then I would go, have dinner with my girlfriends or coworkers or something, and they would tell me how awesome I was. And oh my gosh, Courtney, like, I know you think you're working through all that, but like, you're such a good person. You volunteer and it was that, I feel like that's when God kind of revealed to me, like, yes, I am beautiful and strong and capable and valued, and I have a purpose, but it has nothing to do with what I do. And so it was like, it was weird because it's like, I went through this time of feeling that I wasn't worthy in the past because it was always had something to do with whatever my situation was, right? Like, well, of course I'm awesome and I'm a boss because I just got a promotion. Like, of course I'm beautiful and wanted because I just got this cool new boyfriend, until he didn't call me back or until I lost the job. And so that was when I think, God just kind of downloaded this whole of like, how many people are walking around thinking their worth is tied to what they do? Like, it has to do with me. Like, worth and value and purpose has to do with one thing, and that is what Christ did on the cross, what God allowed to happen on the cross. Like, and I was sitting in a hotel room in Dallas when all of this kind of this thought in this mind, this of She Wears Worth and the name right off the bat. And I just remember thinking, like, hard pass. I love it. Someone should do it. Like, someone else should start it. Like, yes, let's go tell girls and women how worthy and valued they are in Christ. Who's going to do it? And I will subscribe. Like, I will like, and I will repost and all of that. And I remember telling Scott about it, and he was like, cool, do it. And I'm like, no. Oh, I don't think it was for me. I think it's, for someone else to do. And, so fast forward to September of 2019, and I was living in Canada. We'll circle back to personal stuff in a moment, but I finally launched it in September of 2019, and I had no clue what I was doing. Still kind of don't. Very underqualified and underprepared. How do you run a nonprofit? Like, what does that even mean? But all I knew was that as long as God was calling me to do something, I was going to say yes. And I made that vow, like, God, you saved me. You saved me from the wreckage. Like, you turned something beautiful from ashes. And because of that, yes, whatever it is you have, it will make no sense. Probably. It probably won't make much sense, but I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to have the faith that, I don't. Like, you're strong, I'm weak, I'm clueless. So why should I even pretend like I'm not? And we're going to figure this out together. And so, that was kind of the start of this organization. And it has looked so many different ways since. It started off originally being kind of I thought an organization where we would have like clothing drives and use clothes with a background in fashion to bring women together and be able to, make a connection with maybe a woman that I'd have nothing in common with. And we have had those. But we launched in 2019 and then COVID hit. So for 2 years, we literally couldn't meet with people. And that was hard and confusing, and like, God, why would you give me this idea and these dreams and then like literally like lock the door and like put a double lock on it, And in that time, I learned more about my worth and my value. And I led Bible studies, and I think, again, it was one of those things where maybe I got ahead of myself. Maybe I got a little bit too big for my britches, and God was like, slow down. Like, this is my time, not yours. And that's kind of what it's been since, just doing different events and different ways to reach out to women. So Scott and I then started, which is so funny. Like, I just would never, ever, if you would look at the guys that I, dated before, are you kidding? Scott was the kindest, most humble youth pastor. Like, he says that he met me and he was like, you were a Texas tornado. And I was terrified. And I was like, well, yes, valid points. I don't blame you for any of those thoughts. But so it came back, and honestly, through learning about Christ, we grew closer and closer. And I would say, if there is any advice when it comes to relationships, like, it is, man, if you seek a Christian relationship, you need to make a list of what your values are and what you want from that, and you stick to it. Because I think because the way that Scott carried himself through our relationship, his intentionality, his determination to not waver from what his beliefs were, as far as, I was 28 and he was 30, right? We were adults. Like, he would come to visit Austin, and it was, no, we're not staying in the same place. Like, just things that seemed completely foreign to my friends, and even honestly, my family, was like, no, I know what God calls of me. And he did not waver from that. And I like to think that I wouldn't have either, but he 100% led that intentionality. And if that is what you desire, if you seek a Christian relationship and a Christian marriage, which I will say is the most beautiful thing, it is a true representation of Christ and his church. So I hope that's what people desire, but stick to it. And it changed everything because he was so intentional. And I think I got to really, I think I got a view, a glimpse of what Christ was like through Scott, the way that he led me, the way, and, you know, I was this like sassy little thing. There were times where I would tell him things for shock value. Like, you know what? He's this, you know, sin would creep in, doubt would creep in, shame would creep in. And I would have these thoughts of like, well, he was this perfect little guy that grew up in this small town. He's a youth pastor. He's never sinned, you know, never sinned. I'm a terrible human. And so I would tell him things for shock value. And what an idiot. Like, come on, Courtney. But the way he would just handle it and be like, yeah, that's sad that you did that. But, you know, this is what Christ says. And, you know, you've been redeemed. Like, you're not, yes, you've made those mistakes, but that's not who you are now. Like, is that who you want to be? And just, I tell my youth kids all the time, before anyone meets Christ, they will meet a Christian. And it is up to you to figure out what kind of Christ do you want? Like, are you going to be a true representation of it? Or are you, and I think I got to fall in love with Christ because I had someone here on earth that desired, I'm not saying he was perfect, but he did his very best to represent that type of love to me. So we got engaged of the fall of 2017. And then we got married November of 2018. And it was the best. Saying our vows to one another. And I told him on our wedding day in front of friends and family that it was asking me to marry him was the second best question he's ever asked. And the first one was what my relationship with Christ was like. Because as amazing as that day was, and those vows we said to each other and that covenant that we made, he's the second guy in my life. The first one is and always will be Christ. Like, Christ is my first true love. And like, I'm so thankful I met him first. And then Scott was like the bonus on top, like the cherry, you know? Yeah. And with that, I was up visiting before we were married. We were full speed, him moving to Austin. I mean, my job where I lived, like Austin, Texas was like this booming, awesome, growing city. Of course, it made sense that we'd move to Austin, but no. The Lord very much called me up here. We were on the way back from a junior youth retreat. It was February. It was freezing cold. I was in a bus. I could not see out the windows because they were so frozen. And I felt the Lord say, this is where you're supposed to be. And I was so mad. I was like, no. And I knew it. Like, at that point, I'd already heard, you know, I understood what it felt like to like know when Christ was, you know, giving you something. And we came home from that event and I was like, Scott, I need to tell you something. And I don't want you to say a word. And he's like, is everything okay? And I'm like, yes, God called me to move up here. So that's where we'll be living once we get married, but I don't want to talk about it. And he was like, what? So we finally talked about it like a month later and, moved up to Canada. And now again, had I known that day, all the things Christ had in store for me, I mean, I know he called me here because there were two perfect children that needed parents, that needed me to be their mom. And had we lived in Austin, that wouldn't have been the case, right? Like, just things that I think we try to make sense of what God calls us to. And sometimes you just can't, and that's okay. Sometimes in hindsight, you can look back and say, yeah, I knew exactly why. I totally get it. But yeah, so we got married November of 2018, went on a beautiful honeymoon on an island and was hot and sunny, and then experienced my first Canadian winter. I cried every day. I thought everyone up here drove electric cars because like you plug them in, you know, overnight for like the thing. I thought they were all electric because, you know, it had the plug-in. So just things like that. And through that time, I would say the Lord, I joke around, the Lord does not meet you on a beach with a drink with the, you know, a little umbrella in it. The Lord meets you in the desert, and he met me in a frozen tundra. And it was, though, that first year I was stripped down and broken. And I felt like we just peeled back layer and layer of pride and insecurity and doubt and shame and expectations on life. Like, I think sometimes you don't even realize the expectations you have for yourself until they're not there, and how much that can wreck you. And yeah, so after being married for about a year, we started trying having kids, and that's when we realized that infertility would be a part of our journey. And it was for about 4 years. We just had our miracle baby in October. Yeah, and in that time too, we became parents overnight to a incredible 11-year-old and an 18-year-old. They're now 14 and 20. And just things that that literally don't make sense on paper. They don't. I was, gosh, how old would I have been? 31 or 32, and Scott was, 34. And we went from being very, a young couple doing what we wanted when we wanted. And then we had an 18-year-old and an 11-year-old living in our very small house with one bathroom. That's my biggest thing, one bathroom. But it was incredible. And my daughter, I was meant to be her mom. Her and I are so similar. She is not biologically mine. She did not come from my womb, but goodness, we were knitted by the same father. And she is my daughter. She does things and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to call my mom, because this is me at 14. I am getting a dose of my own medicine. I'm sorry. I've called my mom and told her sorry, hundreds of times since they have moved in, I feel like. Yeah. And then through that, again, had we not struggled with infertility, that probably wouldn't have happened. And just all of these things that I just see God popping up over and over and over again. And it's not that he was absent in my life those first 27 years. I just had no idea what I was looking for. I was blind to it. He was there. That's what I want everyone to understand, whether you get what I'm saying, you think what I'm saying makes no sense at all, and that this is all just a bunch of gibberish. God is there knocking. He created you. No one will ever know you better than your creator. And he's standing there knocking at your door. We just choose not to hear it. We muffle it out. We say oh, that noise must be coming from somewhere else, but he is there. And you don't need to be this perfect put together person to answer the door. If you have a messy bun and slippers on and you're in your pajamas, answer the door. It doesn't matter, because he's there. And looking back now, I sometimes when I'm trying to sleep at night, I think back on different times and I'm like, man, this situation at 21, was that God knocking and I just didn't answer? I could have really, that situation could have ended up really bad. That was probably God knocking and I just didn't answer. And it's been the best, saying yes. And I said yes to something I don't even know what I was getting into. But he's there and he wants to know you. Yeah.
I think I'm still back with a new baby, a 14-year-old and an 18-year-old.
Scott and I always knew we wanted to adopt before infertility became part of our story. His mom is adopted. I've always just known I've wanted to. So we went, to speak with CFS and got in kind of know the system. But I remember the first day we met with the social worker, I told her, and I quote, "I do not want to foster. I will not be able to do that. I just want to adopt." And again, ding, 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 there goes the little bell in heaven. And God was like, she has no clue what's, so we went through the whole adoption kind of process and the classes and all of that. And there was one, so when you do adoption classes, at least in Manitoba, it's like a 6 weeks course, and every kind of class you hear from kind of a perspective of the foster system, the adoption system. So, one night it was an adoptive mom, one night it was someone who gave up their child for adoption. And one of the after evenings, it was a family who adopted 2 older boys. I think they were 12 and 15 when they were adopted. And they got on and they spoke, and after that session, it was like, 30, 45 minutes. Scott and I were wrecked. Like both him and I are like crying and we don't understand. We're like, this is weird. Like, why? Like neither one of us were like, maybe God has no, we just didn't, we were like, well, maybe it's just like an emotional day for us, who knows? And it was, I'm trying to think, that was 2 months later, almost to the day, is when H&B came to us. And they needed a place to stay. And it was one of those, let's jump off head first. Like, what's the worst that could happen? My husband is very like, let's think through all the things. And it was him that looked at me and was like, we're supposed to do this. And it was, what? And he was like, I know in my heart, I can't explain it. And I got that. I understood what that, we're supposed to, God is calling me to this. It makes no sense. And so, they moved in with us July 16th of 2021. And so we've since been able to adopt the older one, Brady. And so he's, legally ours. He would have been ours regardless, but legally ours. And then his sister, we're working through all of that. So, but I mean, they're my kids. And then we welcomed our biological son, Waylon, into the world in October. Thinking just with She Wears Worth and my story and where I'm at and all the things is I desire more than anything else for people to know Christ truly. Our pastor said, this was probably a year ago that he said this in church, and it really got me thinking. He said, no one truly meets Christ for who he is, the Christ of the Bible, the Christ who died on the cross for your sins, and says no. Like no one meets that Jesus and is like, nah, I'm good. Like, I don't want that unconditional love. Like, I don't want that grace. I don't want mercy. I don't want forgiveness. Like no one says no. What happens is people meet a version of Jesus that is distorted and watered down or completely misconstrued, or one that comes, or it's a God of the Old Testament where there's no room for grace, and that's the Jesus that people say no to. That's the Jesus that people are like, yeah, no, I don't want to do with any of that church. Like I'll just be spiritual. I don't know what I believe, but I want people to know you can be a good person, but that doesn't mean you're godly. Being good doesn't get you to heaven. Knowing Christ gets you to heaven. Like salvation through our Heavenly Father is how you get to have eternal life. It doesn't matter how good you are. I lived my life for 27 years as a good person, and that didn't mean I was going to get to see my Father in heaven one day. It wasn't until I said, hey, God, I'm yours. Like here I am surrendered. I want my heart to be yours. And that didn't mean that I'm perfect. I'm far from it. It means that every day I am a sinner in need of a savior that I say yes to. And it's really complicated, but it's not. It is a complex thing when you overthink it, but I don't know. I wish more people would I wish you could like erase the Jesus that they think they know and have them understand the Jesus that truly is. Because they would say yes, like jumping and screaming, they would say yes. Like, here I am.
I noticed that your number one point for your introduction was redeemed by Christ through his grace.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to expound on grace?
A big thing for me is, what's hard for people who have not experienced God's goodness is to wrap your mind around the fact that like God loves you and wants you regardless of what you are in this given time. He calls you to change. Like I think, you hear a lot of times like, come as you are, which is 100% true. Christ wants you to come as you are. He doesn't need you to shape up or be better. He wants you to come as you are, but he doesn't want you to stay that way. And I think that's what a lot of, when I say church, it just kind of like the big C church. We just talk about the come as you are, which yes, come as you are. But then what God offers us, because of what he did on the cross, grace, forgiveness, and says, yes, Courtney, you did all of these things that I wish you hadn't done, but you know what? Like, I paid for that on the cross, and you are made new. You are different. That Courtney is a Courtney of the past. And now you can be who I want you to be. And it's a really hard concept. And I think I know it's something that I still sometimes struggle with, that mindset of like, but why? Like, what did I do? How did I earn this? Well, that's just the thing. I didn't. Like, it's through my faith in Christ. Like, I did not do anything to do this. Had I not started me starting She Wears Worth, me saying yes to moving to Canada, me saying yes to, fostering kids, all of these good things that I'm doing for Christ would not make him love me more or less. It wouldn't change the fact. Had I said straight up no to this, I think Christ it would have hurt him. Like, he would have been sad that he had this great thing for me and I said no. But it's not like he'd be like, well, there's one strike off, shoot. Like, two strikes off. Like, it's there every day. I think another word, like unconditional, is not something that our flesh understands. That literally, it has nothing to do with any other fact. It is an unconditional love. Your Father in heaven loves you unconditionally, despite what you do. And, one of my favorite verses, right? It does not matter, neither, angels nor demons, nor nothing in this world will separate you from Christ's love. Even if you say no, he's still going to love you. Yeah. It's not an if then, it is an even if. Like, if you do this, then I'll love you. No. It is an even if you do this, I'm still going to love you. For anyone who is listening to this, and I've learned too that, when Christians speak, they have like their buzzwords that they say, like, if these words make no sense to you, ask someone, ask God. Like, that's like, it seems so silly, but if you're hearing this and you're like, this makes no sense to me, like, go sit in your car, go to your bedroom. I take 5 minutes of silence and just say, God, I didn't understand at all what she was talking about, but I want to. Help me. Like, he's a God who listens and he's a God who responds. And I'm not saying it's going to get like downloaded instantly, but ask, like, just ask the question. No one ever got hurt asking. There is a good chance though that you will meet the real Jesus and get saved, which is pretty cool. So yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the conference then, the She Wears Worth conference. Is it for anyone of any faith to come?
Yes.
Yeah, you don't have to be like, have it all together or know all the answers or totally understand what you've been talking about.
Yeah, great question. First, no, you don't have to have it all together, because I would not be the one in charge of it if that was the case. Yeah, so the conference came about, we had been kind of through the pandemic, we'd been doing online Bible studies and like small little events. And we do, like, here locally, we do Christmas gifts for kids in foster, like a bunch of little things. And we were just coming out of COVID. And I help with our youth here. And it was just every single one of the girls had these huge issues. And every single one of them felt like they were the only one. I talked to them and it's like, the only one that feels this way. No one. And I'm like, okay, well, when 12 people tell you that they're the only one, it's kind of like, no, sister, like, all of you feel this way. And again, I told my husband one night, I just wish, and I'd had the opportunity of going to some of these larger conferences in like Atlanta, where there's just thousands and thousands of people. And, I told him, oh, I wish that, we could just get a private jet and like load all of these girls onto it and like go down, Courtney and her like out of the, crazy too big thinking. And he was like, well, why don't you do one? And again, it was like, no. And he's like, well, why not you can do it. And I'm like, no, I have no idea. Like, I've never put on a conference before. And again, it was one of those, I just kind of kept thinking about it. And as I talked to these teens, and was nothing like that really in Manitoba, I guess, kind of similar type things, but they weren't based on Christian values, or they were done at a much smaller scale. And so I kind of told my husband one night, I was like, hey, just so you know, like yesterday in my prayer time, I told God that if he wants me to do a conference, that I'll do it. He just has to make it happen. And Scott just laughed. And looking back now, he probably was like, well, cool, we're putting on a conference, but, and then I would say from that, I had no clue what I was doing. I had just really, I'd been in Canada for about a year, and then the pandemic hit. So and I live in a town of 300 people. So even just knowing people, I didn't, right? I remember thinking oh, if I still lived in Austin, I could pull this thing off so quickly, and I could just, send a couple emails, and, I'd have venues, and I'd have this, and that just was not the case here. I did not know people. I couldn't pick up my phone and be like, let me just call my 15 Christian friends. It was limited to this tiny town I lived in. And again, looking back, I feel like that was God really being like, well, yeah, because this is me. This is my conference. You're just a tool. I'm just using you. And I'm so glad he did, because as much as I wish it wasn't this, I would easily take credit. It's easy to just be like, you're right, I did put this conference on. But I started slowly telling people, hey, I would like to do this. And I would get an email. Hey, my friend's sister told me you're doing this. I know this speaker. That would be great. Hey, I would love to help out. Here's what I'm good at. It was just people that I, in no way, shape, or form would have ever come across or seen or bumped into on the street, that came into my inbox or sent me a text message or connected through Instagram. The worship, it was one of those, I was so stressed about who's going to do worship. And I literally got on Instagram and scrolled up, and there is this beautiful woman singing. And I'm like, it has to be her. Sent her a message, and she said yes. Within 45 minutes, it just, and there at the conference, standing there, it was to get to look back and say, I didn't do this. I know me. I didn't do this. God did this. I said yes to him, to all of these crazy ideas. I said yes, but he made all of this happen. And the whole point of this conference is really, it's for teen girls. It's grade 9 to age 19. We want to capture that girl who's graduated high school and maybe is now what, what do I do? And it's a Friday evening, afternoon, evening, and then all day Saturday. And really, it is a place for these girls to just, first of all, just come exactly as you are, regardless of what you believe. If it's a religion that you have, if it's a relationship with Christ, maybe you don't go to church at all, maybe you're being dragged by one of your friends, come, because first, you're going to be welcomed. And this is a conference that is designed for teen girls. So it's fun. That was such a heart of mine, was that when these girls walk through the door, I don't want them to think that they were an afterthought, that oh, this is a conference for their mom, that they were a +1. No, every detail down to the silly photo booth in the corner was there because of you, because we knew that you would like that. And so, yeah, it's, come as you are, whatever your beliefs are. It is everything. All of our teachings are, based on the foundational truths that are in the Bible from Genesis throughout. This year, our theme is unshakable. And it is, I would say the theme is what it is this year, because now more than ever, I feel like our teens are being bombarded with the belief that their feelings should dictate their actions. Whether that's how you feel about who you're attracted to, if that's how you feel about what you should be doing during the day, how you just, your feelings are valid, but also that shouldn't dictate how you are. Truth is dictated by Christ. And there is only one truth, and that is what he calls us to. So this year we are tackling some tough topics. We are talking about, in breakout sessions too, and on the main stage, everything from relationships, to mental health and anxiety, to gender dysphoria, to same-sex attraction, to pride and lust and pornography. Like, and those are big things. And I every day I'm like, Lord, help me. Like, these are big topics, but these are also the things that our kids are being faced with in the hallways. And having a 14-year-old in grade 9, if I am not talking to her about these things, someone else is. And I don't want what Christ says about these things to be like the fourth thing she hears about them. I want them to be the first. Like, I want them to be the foundation. And then when she does have a friend in her class who has decided that now she feels like a boy, which is real and it's happening, I don't want that to be the first time she's hearing of it. I want her to be like, okay, well, I've learned that God says this. Now, how do I still love this friend and be kind to this friend and walk alongside this friend? But I have these foundational truths that aren't going to shake, that are unshakable. So yeah, you all, if you will continue to pray for that, there are tough topics, controversial topics, hard topics. But they're the ones that I felt like I couldn't stand up on the stage and just be a cheerleader, like, go girls, go shine your light, which is great. And there will be a lot of that, but also I understand it's really hard to shine your light right now because there's a lot of things that are trying to dim it. So yes, go and shine your light, but we want to give you the tools to like make that light even brighter. And how do we make sure when someone else tries to dim it, like, how can you shine it bright without hurting others and without spewing hate, without judging? So yeah, it's open. Tickets are on sale. We have on our website, just on shewearsworth.com, you can go and see our list of speakers. A lot of the speakers like link to their own web pages, or so you can learn more about them. With that being said, I also, like, being a mom, I take it to heart who I'm letting speak into my daughter's life. You can't just assume, unfortunately, just because someone says they are a Christian, you can't assume that their teachings are the same as mine, right? Or what Christ really calls us to. Again, I think we water down and skew things to fit whatever message we need to get across. So I would definitely say, like, if some of these topics make you feel uncomfortable, or you're like, what does she think about that? Go look at our website, the speakers, you can look in and see what they've done. Look at their past posts, look at, I do the research. And if you still have questions, by all means, reach out to me. But everything that we're teaching, it's based on the foundational truths of how God created man and woman. And he created them to be together, man and woman. And now how do we handle that sin? How do we talk about it and love those, but not conform to the ways of this world?
Courtney, is this only local in Manitoba, or is it can people view it online, or do you have satellite conferences? How does that work if you're out of province?
Great question. I didn't even think of that, because y'all are. Right now, the conference is just local to Manitoba. We are recording all of the talks this year. Like, we'll have them like video recorded, and they will be available online afterwards. So if you wanted to, stream them or watch one of them, we haven't figured out streaming capabilities yet. That is like that's one of those, like, hey, God, when you want to do this, like, we're down for it. But yeah, all the talks will be online after the conference is done. And then it's again, another thing I have put out, like, I want any team that wants to absorb this information, I want them to be able to. And so if there is someone who is from another province, or, who wants to do something like this or put something like this on, I feel like I would be totally open to having that conversation. If, there's someone else in Saskatchewan who wants to do something like this at a smaller scale, by all means. Yeah, I think it's needed. So I'm open to that conversation for sure. And then I guess I should say too, there's, we have our our podcast that we just launched. I just launched season 3, and it's going to be a lot of actually recordings from our first conference. Just so if parents had questions like, well, what are you teaching? What are you believing? They can kind of go and hear some of the speakers from our first conference and have some confidence. And then one thing that we're also doing, which I'm so excited about, makes my like heartbeat faster, is Saturday afternoon. We are inviting I say moms, but really it's the guardian, whoever looks after the teen that is at that event, whether that's a youth leader, a mom, a grandparent, an aunt and uncle, whatever. We are inviting them back to the venue at like a separate location, kind of for an hour. They are going to learn everything that their teen was taught that weekend. Again, having a 14-year-old the number of times, and I'm like, hey, how was your night? Good. What did you learn? Stuff. And I'm like, I know I was sitting in youth with you. Like, I knew what you heard, I think like, yes, it's amazing that the teens were there and we had them for that like day and a half, but we don't do life with them. Like, now that they've just heard some of these things, how do we equip these moms, these guardians to continue the conversation? Like, even to hear like, hey, maybe you don't want to admit it, but these topics are what your daughter is facing. Here are books to read on them. Here are podcasts to listen to. Like, it is our job as older people to stay educated and stay in the know and not pretend that things aren't happening. Like, our teens, they need us. They need us to be educated. They need us to ask them questions. Like, they are faced with so much junk. Like, thank goodness I am not a teen now. Like, you could not pay me to go back and do high school again, ever. And they need us. So I just want these moms and guardians to understand that, like, I know your daughter might pretend like she wants nothing to do with you, but like, she does. Ask her. And here are 5 ways that you can start the conversation. Here are, this is what she heard from this speaker, and it maybe wasn't comfortable for her. Ask her about it, and you can be educated. I don't know. I want to bridge that gap, because it takes a village to raise kids and teens, but man, like, whoever is looking after that teen day in and day out, like, that is your mission. Like, that you are on mission for that child. Like, and my hope is that these moms and these guardians leave feeling a little bit more empowered to, okay, like, I am going to ask her about this. I am going to bring this up. I am going to make this rule because I had no idea this is what was going on social media, type of thing. So we have a phenomenal woman who's going to be leading that. And then afterwards, they'll all be invited in to do kind of the last session of worship. And my hope is that some of these moms or these guardians will get to see their daughters maybe in a way that they haven't before. I know with my mom and I, and she's, Catholic, so goes to Catholic church, all of that, a wonderful woman. Her and I went to a conference last February. It was a teen conference like this, and I went kind of just to learn and understand. And it was in Dallas, and it was the first time that my mom, I was, 34? The first time that my mom had ever seen me worship with my hands raised, and just like, here I am, God. And it sparked a conversation that I'm so thankful we had, but also my heart was so sad that I was 34 and we were having it for the first time. I think there's something to parents seeing their children surrendered to Christ, not in maybe the way that their home church expects them to, with their hands folded in their seats, or, there's something to seeing someone you love in that holy moment surrendered with God that just kind of puts things into this beautiful perspective. And I pray that I pray that for some relationships, for some mothers and daughters, or, guardians and their daughters, to just be like, wow, I had no idea. Like, she felt that way, or, she could just let herself go. And I don't know. I'm so excited. So excited for that.
Thank you. Beautiful.
just bubbling over with excitement for you and what's going to
I know.
happen.
Thank you. So if there's anyone who is listening and is like, man, I would love to know more, or I'd love to get involved, or I am so open to that. The joy and the freedom that comes from knowing your creator is unmatched. Like you could easily spend your whole life searching for what God can do for you in an instant. And we don't realize that. And saying yes to God does not mean you're perfect. It does not mean you have to be a judgmental person. It does not mean you now have these stringent list of rules that you have to follow. And if you don't follow them, you're a bad person. He does call you to a higher life, and he calls you to a higher standard, but you want to live that way, because once you've experienced freedom and joy like that, there's no going back. And I pray that over anyone who hears this. Ask a question, meet with someone. Don't just assume you know about what Jesus has to offer because you know a Christian. I hope that they're representing Christ right, but they also might not be. Ask questions, talk to people. There's no dumb questions at all. And he's there knocking. Just say yes. Like, it's the best.
Courtney, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for your realness. You're just a straight shooter, from Texas. And you tell it the way it is in simple terms that people can understand, appreciate, and relate to. So thank you so much for telling us your story and for sharing everything about She Wears Worth.
Yes, ma'am.
Kathy, how are you feeling about this interview?
Nauseous.
First one, girl.
Nauseous, dizzy, headachy. Had to go for a prayer walk. You girls laugh, but my nerves are, yeah. But I'm at the same time as it's my nerves, I'm excited. And I always tell people who are doing something and are feeling nervous, good. You're not doing this in your own strength. You're doing this in God's strength. So this is good.
Kathy, we got your back.
Okay.
Everything is editable, so don't worry.
You crushed that. You did that so perfectly. I love it. You are like really pumping my tires, and I don't need that. Thank you. Felt like that was a lot. Are there any like questions or thoughts? Or when Scott told me when we were in Africa, he told me that he was from Manitoba. I actually said, where is that? Like I was like, a selfish American Texan, like we're even worse because we only care about Texas. And he was like, it's in Canada. And I was like, really? Interesting. And then I just assumed when you think Canada, I thought of like Toronto or Banff. Like there's nothing. And I visited here for the first time and I was like, this is not what I Googled.
You should commend me because I didn't take on your accent.
You didn't? No.
But at one point I was going to say, bless your pea-picking heart, darling.
Oh my gosh, you should have. I love that. I love the darling, like that. You should have said that. That's great. To tell of my life is to tell of Christ. And honestly, I don't think there's anything cooler or just better than to be able to say, like, I'm going to tell you about my life. And when I'm doing that, what you're going to hear is Christ, Jesus, 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 and Jesus.
Beautiful.
I was sitting here thinking, God, how did I get on this panel that I get to hear all of this?